Welcome to the offseason in the Marshall Thundering Herd Dynasty. Marshall made the college football playoff and lost in the first round to Georgia. But with great success comes a lot of change. The original Marshall roster was not recruited by our head coach, Coach J. So that means the players were not, well, let's just say tied to this regime. And because of that, and because of the national exposure they got during the season, a lot of players felt like they needed to fly on their own and really start to cement themselves with their own legacy, not necessarily tied to Coach J. So to start the offseason, a lot of players started to transfer away. A.J. Turner, despite being an All-American running back, combining for over 1,300 all-purpose yards, decides to transfer to Eastern Michigan. He was a guy that wanted to have 20 carries a game, and he will get that with the Eagles. Tyshawn Chapman was our best offensive player, and I really was looking forward to building this team around him. Yet, he felt as though he could go beyond college football. He declared for the NFL draft, but eventually went undrafted. Braylon Braxton had a deal breaker of brand exposure, so he decided to transfer away to an SEC program in Arkansas. The issue with that is that he is going to be competing on the depth chart, and it doesn't look like he's going to be the starter for this upcoming season. Brian Robinson was a junior receiver who was going to be looking to get some playing time coming into this season, but instead he transfers over to NIU to be the star of their offense. This was a good transfer though. He will definitely be the focal point of their team. Braylon Brown was going to be looking at an expanded role, but instead he looks for an even bigger one, going to Louisville to be their either number 1 or number 2. But he will get a lot more exposure, a lot more nationally televised games, playing for an ACC team. And oh yeah, we will be facing him this season. Cade Conley had a decent year with us, 27 catches for 300 yards, but he felt as though maybe he could have a bigger role, and he transfers over to Southern Miss. This is more of a quality of life transfer. He just thinks he can have a bigger role with another team. Toby Payne, our backup tight end, ends up transferring over to Rutgers, where he will be the number 1 tight end on their roster. He was backing up Cade Conley the entire year. He did not get many looks at all, and this will give him an opportunity to play for a Big Ten team, and like I said, just be a bigger piece to an offense. Jabari Ishmael was not happy with the way we handled his benching. We did end up putting him on the bench for a younger player, and he didn't like that, but he transfers over to Boise State, where he will be the starter at defensive end for them. That begs the question, who stayed around? Well, Cole Pennington was in question, but he decides to stick around to play at his father's alma mater and to continue that legacy with the Thundering Herd. He goes up 80 to 82 overall in the offseason after coming back looking pretty good and in better shape. Chuck Montgomery also returns. So he is really the lone receiver who made an impact a year ago, who is going to be returning for his senior year. He is a lifelong Marshall Thundering Herd, so it's good to see him return, but that's where we begin this offseason. Welcome to the offseason where we need a lot of pieces to rebuild this offense and some parts of the defense as well. We finished 10-4 overall. We finished top 25. Obviously, we lost in the playoffs, but now we have to add some really much needed pieces. Elijah Metcalf also transferred away. Now, remember, there were a lot of guys that transferred into this program coming into this season. Elijah Metcalf, Christian Fitzpatrick, who he did not play this year at receiver. Braylon Brown was a transfer. Tyshawn Chapman was a transfer. Pretty much like the entire offense were transfers, and I think this is going to be interesting year for us. West Virginia gets rid of their head coach. Remember, we beat them in season 1. He ended up finishing 4-8 overall, so they have a new coach. And Braylon Braxton, like I said, was expected to transfer, and I wanted to just show you what that looked like for him. The persuasion chance was medium, but I decided not to persuade him. Another, interesting transfer was Nemo Thompson. Now, I was looking forward to seeing how these guys train in the offseason, and he decides to transfer due to his playing time. I tried to persuade him, and the persuasion chance was high, but we failed to get him to stay. So he transfers away, and he was a freshman, so he would have had 4 years for us. And especially since we're losing a lot of offensive linemen, which we'll see right here. You can see Carl Chester, Christian Fitzpatrick, Harris also graduates. And then you add all of the transfers at receiver that we just mentioned. You mentioned all of the offensive linemen we're going to be losing, including left tackle, Logan Osborne, our starting center, who was actually really, really good this year. Bryce Ramsey, who was really good as a guard, especially running the football. And then both of our tackles, like I said, Jeremy Jones was playing left tackle and Elijah Ellis was playing right tackle for us. So 4 of our 5 starters will be graduating. And then on defense, Monroe Beard, who was one of the best defenders on the defense, he is going to be graduating. And then JJ Roberts was a senior. He will also be graduating as our starting free safety. Just looking around the NCAA, Jalen Milroe goes in the first round. I was very curious to see what Shedeur Sanders and Travis Hunter would do, and they both move on to the next level, and they are both first round draft picks. So really in the offseason, I'm going to need to replenish these weapons and see, exactly how we are going to be able to compete now going into season 2. We obviously won the Sun Belt, but now it's going to be a lot harder. I would say the strategy of going through the portal and recruiting a lot of starters for Marshall this year worked. However, coming into next year, I'm not sure that's going to be a feasible thing to do because we do have some guys that we are looking at as far as high school recruits go, at least to be starters or starters in the near future. Now, looking at the transfer portal, like I said, I don't want to build the team through transfers. I don't want to have this situation happen again where guys transfer away just to get to a bigger program or another opportunity. But one guy that was available in the transfer portal was Caleb Edwards. If you remember, Caleb Edwards was the leading sack getter in the Sun Belt Conference. He finished with 10.5 sacks playing for the Louisiana Raging Cajun, and he would be going into his senior year. I think this would be a huge get for us, mainly because we need guys that can contribute right now and hopefully bridge that gap of all that talent that obviously moved on to either other teams or graduated away. So we add him to the board, and he will be our number 1 guy in the offseason. I just really, really like him. And looking at the other high school recruits that we have, a big get would be Julius Levitre, mainly because we're losing our right tackle. And I think that we just need to be able to know that we can pass the football. He has very, very high pass ratings right now, at least as a 3-star with, the upper 70s, 78, 79. And obviously, depending on what his depth trait will be, that ceiling could be a whole lot higher. Lonnie Curry is a quarterback that I really, really like. He is a 3-star out of Athens, Georgia. He is only 5'11", but we're not going to have Cole Pennington forever. So we definitely need to, go after a few quarterbacks and see which one develops well. So that's my goal. I really want to develop multiple quarterbacks. And looking at his ratings, 95 throw power, 85 and 86 medium and short accuracy, respectively. And then he also has that 93 speed, obviously, and has field general as one of his mental abilities. Another one of those guys could be Hashim Banagu, 6'4", 92 throw power, 87 short, 86 accuracy, and 95 speed. The thing I like about him is that I'm not sure if he's going to be a quarterback. He could play quarterback just based on his attributes, but being 6'4", 95 speed, that's a player we don't have on our roster right now. So I'm going to move him up the board and continue to, recruit him and see what we get out of him. Isaac Darnold, a guy that I think I really need because Logan Osborne's going to be graduating, and I don't have a center on the roster that has a high overall right now. So Isaac Darnold's definitely going to be one of those top guys that I want. Patrick Kamalu is an athlete who can also play tight end. That's what he was listed under as an athlete. And we're really going to go hard after him because I just need talent. And seeing that we just lost 2 tight ends, tight end position is kind of wide open at this point. Coffee Goldsberry is another guy, and he has 76 catching traffic, 82 catching. So we'll see how athletic he ends up being. But I like him. We're going to put the house on him, send the house on him, and see what we can get. James Nevis is a middle linebacker. I don't know what our linebackers are going to look like right now, but I think adding just depth overall, and he is from Ohio, so we will have a close pipeline. But I think we're really missing something. I think it's just more talent that can start right away. And I look at the transfer portal, and how about this? The number 17 guy is here, Javon McIntyre. Now, he went to Pitt last year, was the starting safety. Actually had about 50 tackles last season, and I'm going to add him to the board just to see what happens. He's interested in Boston College, Toledo, actually, and Marshall as his top 3 schools. So we're going to offer him a scholarship. We're going to get him on a visit week 2, and then we're going to move some points around to send the house to see if he bites. And I think this would be a huge get for us. He's a 4-star transfer, and since we made the playoffs, we will allow it. And I think that these 2 guys, Caleb Edwards and McIntyre, will be the top 2 and only transfer portal guys we go after this season, including, I guess on top of all the high school recruits that we are trying to get. So Julius Levitre, we do get a right tackle. He does commit to the team. That was one position I was worried about, and we do get him to commit, so that is a good sign. Caleb Edwards is still there. We're competing right now with TCU, and I'm going to start to hard sell him, get him to attend a practice, and see if he will continue. Javon McIntyre, we actually jump Boston College and Toledo. So we are the only team to schedule a visit right now, and we are ahead of both of those teams. Lonnie Curry, we're in good position right now. So both of those 3 guys, it looks pretty good. Isaac Darnold does commit to the team. Now, he is technically probably going to be one of the best centers on the roster. I believe we only have 1 center besides him. But then we have some bad news as we advance on. Caleb Edwards is now more interested in TCU, and now UCF is gaining ground on us here. They scheduled their visit for week 5. That's not a good sign, because usually when you see a team have a visit and the player has not committed to your team yet, there could be a second team on the horizon who's going to make a hard push, and UCF is right on our heels. So hopefully we can get him to commit. But we can only commit 50 points, so I guess we're kind of limited there. But we do have a ton of recruits. I want to go to the bottom of the board here and look at a couple of guys that we have added here. Pat Goldwire is an outside linebacker. We're not going to really scout these guys. There's no point not to use any points right now, because why do it when, we can use those on actually recruiting instead of just, worrying about scouting. So we can just see what the ratings are when they come to campus. So that's what we're going to kind of do here. DeMarcus Bettis is a fullback. I want a fullback on the roster. I don't know how I'm going to use him, but it would be cool to have a guy that can block pretty well. Tito Bueno is a punter. Epinesa is a kicker. I do want to add some special teams guys and just add that depth and see where we go from here. So now on to National Signing Day, and we'll see the results of our recruiting efforts. And Javon McIntyre commits to Marshall. This is a huge get, especially after losing J.J. Roberts now to graduation and losing Monroe Beard. We now have a veteran defensive player. DeMarcus Bettis does commit to the team. He is out of Florida as well, so we have a fullback. I don't know how we're going to use him. Alex Holman is a defensive end. We do get Kevin Epinesa, who we just showed a little bit ago. We do get the kicker. And then Dwayne Folkerts, who was a right guard. We end up getting him as well. And those are really the only 4 guys to sign on National Signing Day. Caleb Edwards does commit to TCU, so we miss out on him. I was really looking forward to seeing what he could do with us. And then maybe the worst news. He was my favorite recruit here in the offseason, but Lonnie Curry commits to UCF. I knew it. When I saw that they had a visit scheduled for week 5, I knew something was up. Hashim Banagu does commit to the team. He has 92 throw power, 95 speed. I'm really excited to see what he looks like as another position, though. I like him as a quarterback. I really do. But that size and that speed, he can play, anywhere. Maybe even tight end. Patrick Kamalu, 80 catching in traffic, 77 catching. He commits. He has gold, the natural, and team player, which means he can play any position. He can play out of position. So that really shows his skill set. He's also a star development trait. Lane Burns, another linebacker that commits to us. He is a star development. So I want to highlight these guys because these are guys that are big gets and guys that can develop. This was one of those guys I did not scout because what's the point? Just might as well just go after them and see what they are when they get to campus. Lloyd Short, a 3-star cornerback, is also a star development. So this is amazing because coming into I wouldn't say a rebuild year, but a building year, and we just need these talent guys we can develop. Kerry Cage, who we've been really recruiting all year, he already committed like halfway through the season, but he ends up being star dev. And I really love his ratings, especially with that 81 speed from right end. And then Alex Holdman, maybe the biggest get in the offseason, elite development trait as a 3-star defensive end, 6'4", 276. I can't wait to see what his ratings look like. We have literally no idea, but he is an elite development trait. So this is going to be fun to see a lot of these guys develop. Looking at the recruiting class rank, we are not in the top 20, obviously, but we are down here at 43. That actually is one of the higher ranking recruiting classes for Group of 5 teams. And I believe it is actually the best ranking of all Group of 5 teams. We're grouped right in there with some of the best ACC schools and Big Ten schools. The next team I see down the list as a Group of 5 team is Tulane, and they are in the 60s. We are by far the best recruiting class in the Sun Belt, with Louisiana at 76, Troy at 85, Southern Miss at 91. So we had a great offseason here, and it's a good start to this series. I do want to talk about walk-ons a little bit. And if you follow my channel in the community tab, I did put out player submissions to get you guys in the game. So players that did not have that animation where they commit to the team, where they sign a letter of intent, those will be considered walk-ons and be renamed, except for the athletes. So the athletes that we go through right now will be guys that end up staying with the same name. So let's start with Hashim Banagu. We have 5 athletes total, and Hashim Banagu is a 6'4" athlete quarterback, but I see him benefiting from actually being a wide receiver. If I look at everything, he could also kind of be an edge rusher. He's got 78 finesse moves, 75 power moves at 95 speed. That would be amazing, but realistically at 199 pounds, he wouldn't play at, an edge rusher. He's probably too light. So I look at him and I look at what he can do well. Yeah, he could be a speed rusher. Yep, he could be. But after losing a lot of receivers, I think he's going to benefit even from being a 66 overall wide receiver. And I think I'm going to try to get him the ball, especially use that size and speed combination. And I think that's what we're going to do. I would say quarterback, but we have a few quarterbacks that we recruited this year that we don't really need him there. One of those guys is Courtney Lyles. He was my original favorite recruit. We have been recruiting him pretty much since day one. He's a lefty and wears number 7. Does that remind you of anybody? He's got actually pretty good catching ratings, or at least receiver ratings, but it's not good enough, at least for me, to justify moving him to receiver. But I really like him. He's got a good arm. One thing I like about him also is that he's got 2 mental abilities in team player and the natural, which makes him very sturdy as a player. High injury rates. He's going to be a tough player, and there's no doubt in my mind I'm putting him at quarterback. He is, like I said, one of my original favorite recruits, and he's going to be a guy that we develop. DeAndre Hendricks is kind of the same way. We were recruiting both Lyles and Hendricks together. Hendricks doesn't have the greatest route running either. He's got 89 speed, which isn't amazing, but it's good speed, especially for a quarterback. He is a righty, so a little bit different than what we saw from Courtney Lyles, but he is 6'2", 193. I say he's a quarterback through and through. I want to mention that Hendricks and Courtney Lyles are both, I forgot what it's called, not quick development, but impact development. But the thing with Hendricks is that he has 79 injuries, so that's something to look out for. But he's going to end up being a 68 overall quarterback. And like I said, I'm not in a rush for these quarterbacks to play anyway because Cole Pennington is obviously our starter. Our next athlete is going to be Keon Canada, and I think one thing I'm going to do is put him at guard. He can also play defensive tackle, but we recruited a lot of defensive tackles. I look at left guard, and we have a senior starter right here. So if we give him a year to develop, he could maybe have a big off season, which I've seen in this game before, which we'll talk about a little bit here in a second, where we talk about guys that got a lot better in the off season. And then Patrick Kamalu is our last guy. We were recruiting him as a tight end, but I look at his ratings and I see some other traits that I really like. He's got 81 tackling, 76 hit power, 81 pursuit. His zone coverage is only 64, so that kind of, makes me think that maybe he's not a safety, but I guess he could play there and just develop those skills. But I think that he might be better suited as an outside linebacker, and we could develop him there, and he will kind of already be the highest rated outside, at least left outside linebacker on the entire roster right now, in front of Chasen Clark. Now, the last guy I want to talk about here is the local kid out of Huntington, West Virginia, Kelechi Nwangwu. He is going to be one of my favorite players in this series, simply because he's a local kid, though, and he's really good. He's got 83 block shedding, which is the highest on the team, if you believe it or not. So I look at what we can move him to, and it's defensive tackle. So talking about the offseason and talking about player development, I started out this series with the motivator tree, and I'm going to start to upgrade that tree to get better offseason training. And I look at a couple of guys that had good off seasons. Pennington went up 4 overall. Montgomery went up about 6 overall. So he's now at 80. He is our highest rated receiver. But I want to talk about some guys that really had a great offseason. First is Tracy Stevens. Now, the issue with Stevens is that he is pretty much a one-trick pony. He's a blocking tight end. He's not going to impact the passing game at all, to be honest with you. He is maxed out with his hands in that department. So we're really going to have to find a way to get our young players involved at the tight end position. Eric Meeks is a guy that had a decent offseason. He goes up to 78 overall. He was at about 69 or so last season. So he's going to be a starter. Peloni Franklin actually goes up to 80 overall. And the biggest, change with his ratings is that he's going into his junior year, but he goes from 80 finesse moves to 85 all in one offseason. So that's a pretty big jump, especially for a guy that only had, I believe, 1.5 sacks last year after taking over for Jabari Ishmael. And I think that he's going to be poised for a pretty big season getting after the passer. But let's talk about the guy that had the biggest offseason, and it's Chasen Clark. You just saw it. 65 overall. He goes up to an 81, a 16 overall jump, as he now instantly becomes the starter. Pass coverage with a 79 zone. He's got 90 pursuit. He is going to be amazing. He's also got 99 jumping, which is hilarious to me. Amir Foster goes up to 81 overall after one off season. He had an amazing season one with 6 interceptions, along with his running mate next to him, Corey Myrick. Myrick was 71 overall last year. He jumps up 10 overall after a 6 interception season, and he is now an 81 with 95 zone coverage. So as you can see, recruiting guys with good development traits is very important. So here is our schedule going into season number 2. West Virginia will be the opener, and we played them last year and beat them, but now we go into their house and play them to open the season. We then go on the road to Camp Randall to play Wisconsin. They are a top 10 team. And then, like I said, we will face Louisville for our first home game, and we get to face off against our former receiver and Braylon Brown. We then end our non-conference play on the road versus Syracuse. So 3 of our first 4 games are on the road. And you can see we are playing ACC teams because the ACC has their eye on us and could extend an invite for next season. Looking at our conference play now, we play Georgia State and then Louisiana, game number 2 already. We do play James Madison this year. Now, there was a bug. I wanted to bring back divisions, but I was notified of a bug in the game where if you do that, it will pretty much freeze your game and throw an error. So I did not bring that back. So that is going to be our conference schedule here in season 2. I looked at the preseason All-Americans just to see if AJ Turner would be there for Eastern Michigan now, but he is not, even though he did win All-American last year. He will be their lead back. But we don't have any preseason All-Americans at all, which is actually kind of surprising seeing that we were in the playoffs last year, at least have one. We do have Sun Belt preseason first teamers in Chasen Clark now, Cole Pennington, Amir Foster, and now the new transfer from Pitt, Javon McIntyre. So this is going to be a lot of fun seeing him. I don't know what to expect out of a elite safety, but he is right now the number 1 overall player on our team at 85 overall. He's only going to be with us for 1 year, and this is what he does well. High awareness, good run support. His zone coverage is actually interesting. I thought it'd be a lot higher. He's only at 77 zone, 89 speed, 91 excel, 91 stamina. So he's going to be a guy that is going to get after the football. Last year, he had 59 tackles total, 2 interceptions. You know, these numbers aren't really, really impressive, but he was a number 17 portal guy, and we got him to commit to our team. So this is where he'll be for his final college season. Now I'm going to go position by position and just talk about guys that I really, really like at each position group. First is Courtney Lyles. Like I said, he's a lefty. He's probably going to be redshirted here in season 1, even though, like I said, I love what he can do. We obviously have Cole Pennington. Like, we don't need him. So I'm at least going to carry 3 active quarterbacks. So that means that DeAndre Hendricks will not be redshirted, but Courtney Lyles will be. So I'm going to allow him to, develop under that red shirt. Our running back room is a little depleted now. Brian Santana was a freshman who came in. Barrett McFadden scored a touchdown in the college football playoff game versus Georgia. But I just don't know right now who's going to be, the lead back here. It's definitely up in the air, and we'll see who does the best here to start season number 2. But right now, it's going to be a running back by committee. I do really like that Santana has some mental abilities. Our receiving room is depleted a little bit. Chuck Montgomery returns. He's our number 1. But who's our number 2, 3, and 4, and 5? I have no idea. It can be any one of these guys. It could even be DeJuan Whitehead, who I really, really like. He has the fan favorite and the best friend mental ability, which will give composure to the quarterback when we convert first downs. The issue is his route running is just not there yet, but he is 97 speed. So we're going to need to use that speed in some way. But I think his route running could hurt us here, especially since, our offensive line is pretty unproven. We're not going to have a lot of time to throw the football. At tight end, a lot of guys that do different things. Stevens, we already saw, was a blocking tight end. But I want to talk about some younger guys like Aiden Steinfeld, who was on the roster last year as a freshman. And he's going to play this year because he is one of our better route runners and has one of the better hands as far as tight ends go. And then there's Zaire Jones, who ends up being one of those walk-on players that we talked about a little bit earlier. Now, looking at him, 82 catching, but his route running is almost capped. Like, this is kind of as good as he's going to get. So I think, it's going to be smart to use his speed, but just know that he's not going to get much better than what he is. Let's talk about the offensive line. Brian Sampson will be at left tackle now. He had a good offseason, so he improved. Jalen Slappy was the only returning offensive lineman on this line. He is now at 77 overall. Isaac Darnold comes in as the top freshman center, and he comes in as the top overall center. So he is going to start right away. I talked about it a little bit here in the offseason that we don't have a center that's a high overall, and right now he is right now the presumptive starter, just based on his ratings, based on, not having that depth. He has 83 pass blocks, so at least he's going to be able to protect Cole Pennington, but his run blocking, pretty bad. Eric Meeks, like I said, had a big offseason. He's our highest rated offensive lineman. And then looking at right tackle, I don't really know what we're going to do, but Julius Levitre is going to be a guy that I'm not going to redshirt because there is a possibility he could play. Based on his pass blocking, he is the better pass blocker out of the two right tackles. We'll just see how this start of this season goes. There's going to be a lot of competition. So at defensive end, if we switch sides of the football, we do have a couple of guys I want to talk about and develop. Jaden Duck is one of those guys. He's going to be a guy that I look to redshirt this year and eventually play, but Michael Green has that spot held down. The other end position, I want to look at Alex Holdman because obviously he was the big recruit here in this offseason. We did not scout him at all. Elite dev traits. Looking at his ratings, 77 finesse moves. He is 67 overall, but look at his caps. They are like almost all the way up. So he's got a lot of developing to do. And quite frankly, I don't see any rush to play him. I'm probably going to end up redshirting him. But one guy I really, really like, and a guy that's going to play right away, is Kerry Cage. I don't know in what capacity he's going to play, but he's going to get playing time. He's got 81 speed, something we don't have at defensive end. He's also got pretty good strength. So we're going to see how a lot of these young defensive linemen do, because that was a position we really had to go after, especially after losing Tyquez Legs and Isaiah Gibson. Now at defensive tackle, Kelechi Nwangwu is right now pretty much a starter. 83 block shed, like I said, is one of the highest on the team. So we're going to play him pretty much right away. At outside linebacker, we have Chasen Clark, and I already talked about it. He is instantly a starter after the offseason that he had. Went from 65 overall to 81, which is unprecedented. Middle linebacker, I don't really know. We have Watson, we have Hart, we have Heflin. But now we have a couple of freshmen coming in, like David Hardwick Jr. You probably recognize that name a little bit. He is a walk-on, but he is a star development. So he will have a lot of room to grow. And I imagine he's going to be a pretty good player in the future. So definitely a guy to look out for at middle linebacker. Looking at outside linebacker on the other side, we have Jaden Yates. And he did not play last year, so I don't know what he's going to look like. But he looks like he has some talent bars to fill up there, so he's got some potential. At cornerback, we already know about the big three. Amir Foster, Corey Myrick, and Josh Moten. But who is going to be behind him? We do have MJ Pierre-Achefu. Now, he is going to be that star development quarterback, and he will be a walk-on. So we don't know what, like I said, if we're even going to need our depth down the board at cornerback, but it's definitely going to be there. And then at safety, we have Daytion Smith, and he's going to be the starter. He had a couple of lapses last year in coverage, so I'm curious to see how he's going to do this year as the starter once again. And then Reese Veerhoff and Epinesa at kicker. And then we have Will Shoemaker, a walk-on punter. He will probably be redshirted, though. And then Nick Kersonas, who will be a returner as our punter. So I do want to talk about our playbook. We're going to try out the Florida State spread here to start season number 2 and see how that goes. I definitely want to use our speed because we don't have the technicians that we had last year at route runners. So we're just going to have to use that new speed we have at receiver and see kind of how it goes as we hop into season number 2. Hope you guys enjoyed this off season. And let me know what you guys thought of it. What do you think of the recruits? Who do you think we should play? Who looks good to you? And the schedule. I want some predictions down below next episode probably, and see how we will do. Now let's do it this episode. Put some predictions down in the comment section below and let me know what you guys think of this team. Hit subscribe, hit that like button. Stay tuned. Let's get it. Let's go.
I like getting money, I got time to get it. Target on me, so my car's a tinny. Dancing with the devil, I don't bargain with it. Bobbing in the dash, and the stick is with it. And I hit the 4-5 on the west side. But I'm from the east side, this how we slide. This how we ride, yeah, this how we ride.